Now, as South Africans observed Human Rights Day on the 21st of March yesterday, Abahlali baseMjondolo have denounced the commemoration as meaningless for the poor and homeless. The Bill of Human Rights guarantees adequate access to decent housing for everyone and that no one may be evicted from their homes, have their homes demolished or without particularly a court order. Now, the bill also requires that reasonable legislation and measures should ensure the legislation of this right. Abahlali baseMjondolo is a 150,000 member movement of the poor in South Africa, some of which are shack dwellers without considerable housing. We speak to the Secretary General of it now, Thapelo Mohapi. Thapelo, thank you so much for the time. Dismissing it ultimately, the commemorations of Human Rights Day, of course, then that were held by many of the political parties, including government itself, then ultimately not fulfilling the needs of the poor.
Good morning to the viewers. It's always great to speak to you. As the poor and marginalized, we continue to be brutalized by the state. As we speak right now, we are in and out of court trying to fight for our rights to remain in the cities. People are being evicted in Palito because the elites and middle-class people think that because the prime land is not for the working class and the poor, and they want to drive them away. We are seeing a militarization of these areas where poor black people are pushed forcefully. Forced removals are still an order of the day for the poor and marginalized. We are seeing young people in the informal settlement, children not being able to get proper food. Some families, about 20 million people, still starve in this country in 30 years of democracy. And we are saying, therefore, there is no way for us to celebrate for the human rights that was fought for. We recognize the rights that were fought for by the Sharpeville massacre, during the Sharpeville massacre. We recognize the role that was played by our forefathers in fighting against the evils of apartheid. But we are saying that has been betrayed by corrupt politicians who use money that is meant for housing for the benefit of the few. We have seen in Lamontville people being washed away, which were allocated by government in these particular houses. And therefore, we are saying, therefore, for as long as poor black people are dying in undignified way in this manner, we cannot celebrate human rights.
If that really is the case, then ultimately it's the promises that have continued to be laid forward by political parties and in previous years, of course, by the ruling African National Congress. Then now with the GNU, is there not a sense that perhaps things are slightly different, or the promises perhaps are different because it feels as though they're fighting differently? Does that not change perspective at all?
What we are seeing from the GNU, we are seeing that the politicians who are part of the coalition of this government, particularly in KwaZulu-Natal, we are seeing people going back to their constituencies and serving their constituencies rather than serving people as a whole in South Africa. We don't see them. I mean, we've written 3 times to the Premier, Tami Ntuli from this province, asking for his audience to actually lay out, introduce ourselves. But he has no time for us. He will also, he will always have a time for his constituencies, which is the IFP. So we are seeing the very same way of leading that the ruling party, the ANC, has done, where people who are not members of a particular political party will not receive audience or any services from the government, and people going back to serve people who are their membership base. And we are saying that should not be the case, and therefore the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal must come and engage with Abahlali baseMjondolo. And we are calling on that, and I have been doing that for a number of times in my interviews to say that the poor and the marginalized need to be listened to. We are existing in South Africa, we are voting in South Africa, and therefore our rights should be recognized like any other person's rights. Our dignity should be recognized like any other dignity. Section 10 of the Constitution speaks about the dignity, and we don't have that dignity as Abahlali baseMjondolo. We are seeing people being washed away by floods, food taken away by floods. We are seeing people burning in their shacks alive. So it can't be in 30 years of democracy. This country has enough to feed all of us. This country has enough budget to house each and every one of us. No one should be homeless. But the inequalities that exist where government of the day is serving the interest of the rich and the elite and forgets about the marginalized like ourselves, we will not be able to fight this crisis for as long as a government does that.
Being able to fight this, though, is obviously something that this government keeps speaking about. And I say this government, not necessarily the GNU, but previously even the ANC was speaking about everything from building houses to ensuring that the poor in the country are well looked after, which included the social relief distress grant as well, which came about as well. Are all those things helping at all? Is that aiding any of the process here? Because we're seemingly stuck between how do we help, and maybe there's just a misalignment in what it is necessary and needed versus what is given.
Yes, I think the attempt by government to address these issues is just a drop in the ocean. The 370 that has been given to people who are unemployed. We've just done a survey amongst the 150,000 members of Abahlali baseMjondolo. We've discovered that only 10% of the unemployed gets the SRD. But what is happening is that government, we don't know what is the procedure in actually that they follow in order to give people this amount of money. But further than that, I'm saying that it's not helping at all. We now have a VAT that is due. The little that people get, the 370, will actually reduce their groceries, which has not been enough for the poor and marginalized. We are seeing people on the ground very desperate. We've seen people eating wild plants in order for them to survive. So it is a dire situation. It should not be like this in South Africa, in a free, democratic South Africa, where everyone have the rights that is guaranteed in the Constitution. But that right is only in paper. It's not necessarily practically happening on the ground. We have a government that is detached from reality. They don't know what's happening in the informal settlement, in the rural areas, how people are suffering. Now we have a crisis with water. Where I live, in the informal settlement where I live, there is a water shedding. Water leaves at 4 p.m. and comes back in the next day at 5 a.m. So nothing has been communicated to us. We just realized that this is something that has been happening for a while. Water tankers, the corruption that is taking place there, people making sure that infrastructure is not being provided for water because they want to have their own tenders, their water tankers all around the area. So the poverty that we are experiencing in the informal settlement in the rural areas is man-made deliberately by those who want to enrich themselves and their families.
Have you had a chance then to be able to engage then with political leaders, especially with regards to those needs, with regards to setting forward the mandate that you are setting forward, particularly for Abahlali baseMjondolo?
Yes, as I said that we really want to engage the provincial government in KwaZulu-Natal. We are in the process of trying to engage the provincial government in Gauteng. So we want a government that listens to the people. We want a government that responds to the need of the people. But if politicians do not listen to us, then we have no choice to take our struggles to the streets. And that's what we're going to do. Because what do you do as the poor and marginalized? A government of the day does not listen to you. You have no option but to protest against what we are faced with. So we are trying to engage with the government, but the government is not coming on board.